All right, so for this evening we're going to begin. I'll talk about meditation for a little while, and then we'll do some guided meditation together. And I'm going to be introducing the metta meditation practice tomorrow, but for today I'd like to do some breath meditation with you all. Now, I assume that most of you have probably done breath meditation before. And so what I would like to do is to offer some kind of reflections about this practice and about ways of approaching it. Now, in our the way that we do meditation these days, there's a lot of emphasis, there's a lot of different methods and teachings and all of these kinds of things. And I looked at a meditation app some time ago, and I was kind of horrified. There was like 40,000 different kinds of meditation on there, or something like that. I'm like, wow! Like in Theravada Buddhism, like in the Visuddhimagga, the Theravadan meditation manual, there's 40 different kinds of meditation. We thought that we were pretty proud of that we had 40, and now there's like 40,000. So I don't know what all of those different methods are doing, but I guess probably most of them are variations on the same thing. But the thing about meditation really is that the externals of meditation are not all that important. So we have all these different methods of meditation, and frankly it doesn't really matter too much. As long as you find a method that you're happy with and that you enjoy doing and that you find rewarding, then that's probably good enough. The emphasis on meditation methods is very much a modern thing, and when we look into the suttas, when we look into how the Buddha taught, then we don't find so much of an emphasis on that. When the meditation methods that are taught there are very simple, and the Buddha was much more emphasized on the context that meditation happens in. So this is why I've been spending a lot of time talking about like contentment and mindfulness and these kinds of things, because these are the things that make your meditation work. It's not about the method so much. So don't get hung up on methods. Methods are okay, but they're not really the essence of it. They're just something to help you get started along the way. So what I'm going to do for this session this evening is I'm going to give a few reflections. I'm not going to share a meditation method necessarily as such, but I'm going to encourage you to reflect on and look at the way that you think about meditation and the way that you approach meditation. There's a famous Zen simile which says that, which talks about the finger which is pointing at the moon. And the idea here is that the teachings are like the finger, and what's important is what the finger is pointing to, which is the moon. And that's a very beautiful simile, but what is easy to overlook in that simile is the fact that if the finger wasn't pointing in that direction, you wouldn't see the moon. So the point of that is not to say that we dismiss what the teachings say or we don't pay attention to it. In fact, it's because of what the teachings say that the teachings direct our attention in a certain way. And when the teachings when the things that we hear, then they become ideas in our own mind, they become thoughts in our own mind, and they become beliefs. And then those beliefs about things become the framework that direct our attention, and because they direct our attention, they create our realities. Think about it. If somebody says to look in a certain direction, then we look in that direction, and then we see what we see in that direction, and then that then creates some response in us, some emotional response or some reaction. Maybe we like something or we dislike it. So the fact that we've looked in a certain way, that we've focused our direction in a certain way, shapes what our reality is, shapes what our emotions are. The same thing happens in meditation. Except in meditation, it happens even more powerfully, because the world that we're creating in our meditation is so inwardly directed. The world outside is sort of somewhat objective, somewhat like a shared reality. So when we're in meditation, the way that we pay attention and the way that we direct our mind creates the reality that we experience. And yet, I find it's interesting that often we don't really question this. And in fact, often as meditators, we assume that kind of the opposite is the true. Often as meditators, we assume that what we see when we meditate is some kind of direct experience. We assume that the things that we're seeing and the things that we're experiencing is just the reality of our feelings and perceptions and memories and so on as they are. But that's not true at all. Because that whole world, that whole inner world of experience is something that we are creating as we're sitting there. It's not something which is objective and which just sits there waiting for us to find it. The feelings, the pains, the anxieties, the peace, the letting go, all of those things are things which is part of an ongoing process that we are shaping and forming as we're doing our meditation. And that's why if you do different kinds of meditation, you'll have different kinds of experience. And most people here will have tried out a few different kinds of meditation, and you know that that's true, that if you try one kind of meditation, you tend to have this kind of experience. Try another kind of meditation, you'll tend to have that kind of experience. So my point here is very simple, is that what we do when we sit down to meditate is shaped by the teachings that we've heard. At its most basic level, none of us would be meditating if we hadn't heard the word meditation. We have to have the concept or the idea of it first before we start to do the thing. And then as we meditate, how we use our mind, how we focus our attention, what we value, what we don't value, this is shaped by the ideas that have been transmitted to us through listening, through conversation, through reading and so on. Now, one of the things that I noticed a few years ago, I started to sort of notice a difference between the way that people talked about meditation and the way that the Buddha talked about meditation. And I found this is very kind of curious. And I also think it's curious that it took me like more than 15 years of practicing and studying the suttas before I noticed this. This is a cautionary tale, girls and boys. You think you know, but you don't. And it takes a long time to figure stuff out. You see, tell me if this sounds familiar. That when you sit down to meditate, you try to concentrate on your breath. And when you try to concentrate on your breath, then it's hard to do that because your mind is always wandering off somewhere. And all of these thoughts keep coming in, right? Memories and so on. And even though you try to focus on your breath and concentrate on the breath, you try to keep the breath as like the meditation object and you try to keep that in mind, but it's really hard to do that. Does that sound familiar? Yeah? Anyone ever had that experience in meditation? Yes? Think about it. Ask yourself, is that what meditation is like? Does it have to be like that? It just happens? Okay, so you let the thoughts go and you don't try not to go too much into them? Okay, if it happens, it happens. Yeah. Yes?
What helps me is see that as a process, and I see a lake going down.
Okay. Ah. Right, okay. Uh-huh. Okay, so a muddy lake gradually settling down. That's a very beautiful image for purifying the mind. actually from the Buddha, but anyway. The Buddha actually used that kind of imagery a lot in the suttas. You find this kind of imagery of lakes and meditation and things like that. Yeah, so... Okay. Okay, so... What if I was to tell you that the Buddha didn't talk about meditation in that way at all? I'm not talking about the lake simile. He did talk about that. I'm now talking about what I just said earlier. The Buddha didn't talk about meditation that way at all. Number one, there's no word for a meditation object in the suttas. So in early Buddhism, there's no in fact word in all of the Pali canon. There's no word for object in the sense of like an object of the mind. That's weird, isn't it? Maybe in some of the later Abhidhamma texts there might be, but basically there's no real word for it. So these days, this is a very common kind of language which you hear a lot in modern Theravadan meditation. They'll say, you have a meditation object, you say, experience, you become aware of objects in your meditation and so on. That kind of language we don't find the Buddha using at all. When using that language, the modern day Theravadan teachers are translating a Pali word, aramana. But the word aramana is not used in that sense in the suttas. So the Buddha didn't use that word in that sense. Now this is quite significant, and the word object is a significant word because, like I said before, words shape our experience and they change the reality of what's actually happening. What is an object? Right? What do we mean when we say something's an object? Well, when we say something's an object, obviously it exists objectively, right? There it is. I mean, an object can't mean any... I'm not getting into like philosophical problems here. So I'm not talking about like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound, right? I'm not talking about a philosophical problem of objective existence. I'm just talking about in an ordinary everyday sense that this glass sort of objectively exists, and if I hold it there, it's the same, and if I put it down there, it's more or less the same, and if I walk out the room, it's more or less the same. And so that's what we mean when we say something has an object, that something is an object, right? It sort of has its own kind of existence. But in what way is your breath an object? It's kind of weird, isn't it? Or it's something you can experience, right? It's a reality that you can experience. Or you're a thought. In what way is a thought an object, right? So your breath is not something that exists objectively out there in the world. Your breath is something that you are doing. It's a behavior or an energy or a process, but it's not an object. So when we call the breath an object of meditation, and when we think about it as an object, it changes our relationship to it. No longer is the breath something that we're doing, no longer is it part of us. Right? But we've torn the breath out and put it out there. Think about it. Think about the mental space that you inhabit when you meditate. You inhabit a mental space, I'm guessing, where there's like an observer in here, right? Which feels like me, this feels like I, and this observer in here is trying to focus on the breath, which is something different, right? This is kind of the mental space feels like. That's why it's so hard. And then you have all of these thoughts. So what's going on with these thoughts? And all of these thoughts keep coming into you. And I've had strange experiences on this tour. I've been teaching, for several months and going to different places in the world and teaching these things. And I've got some very strange reactions about this. And when I taught, especially when I was in Santa Barbara, it was very memorable. And we taught, and I asked people where these thoughts keep coming in. Where do they come from? I mean, is it like the government? Is it aliens? Is it ghosts? It could be all of the above, right? And of course, the thoughts aren't coming in from anywhere. The thoughts are something that you are doing. The thoughts are something that you're creating. And when I talked about this to this group, then people were like really amazed. They said, like, we've never heard that, we never thought of that before. We just thought that thoughts just happened, that they're just kind of somehow randomly there. And so there's this tendency in modern meditation teachings, because they want to objectify everything. You treat thoughts as something which is sort of out there and doesn't really have anything to do with you. But of course thoughts have something to do with you. It's what you are thinking. And thoughts aren't an object, they're a mental behavior. It's what you're doing. And your thoughts are what happens when one part of your mind is trying to communicate with another part of your mind. That's what a thought is. And so if you just want to close your thoughts down and shut them down, then all you're doing is saying to your mind, I don't want to hear what you have to say. Sorry, are you putting your hand up or are you just scratching your head? No, you're putting your hand up. Yes? Excellent. What problem exactly?
Because of from experience of last tradition, we are taught and we come to see sometimes that we are not feelings, we are not thoughts. So I am not the feeler and I am not the thinker. I'm not that. So I came to ask myself, if I'm the thinker, I'm doing, if I'm creating my thought, let's see if I can guess which thought will come.
Right.
There was how can I create it? I think I see what you mean, but it's just a different perspective.
Yeah, it's a different. It's an interesting experiment to try that out. I haven't thought of that one before, but that's an interesting experiment. Yeah, I might talk more about this later, but just very kind of briefly, just it's important to not confuse different levels of the teaching. And the teaching of not self is a very, very profound teaching. And what I found is that, practically speaking, so yes, of course, what you're saying is absolutely right, of course, right? There's no such thing as a self, and if there's no such thing as a self, how can I have any thoughts that belong to me? You can't, right? But what I found is that, practically speaking, most people, most of the time, are not really at a level of insight to understand not self. And so what they do instead is that they dissociate, and they think that this is actually not self. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, and maybe it will be more understandable in just a minute exactly why I'm getting to it. Right. Let me come round to where I'm getting to with this, and then maybe it will be more clear. All right. So we have these thoughts, and the thoughts are something that we're doing. Once you realize that the thoughts are something that you're doing, yes, it's true, we don't have complete control over our thoughts or whatever, but still, we do have some control over it. And once you accept the ownership and the responsibility of your thoughts, then that's actually really good, because that means that you can stop them. They're not something, you're not the victim of your thoughts. Thoughts are not something that happen to you. Thoughts are something that you do, and if you do them, you can stop doing them. And there's no trick to this. You see, when people meditate, They get into this thing where they've objectified their thoughts, put them out there, the thoughts are something happening to them, and then they want some kind of trick that can help them to stop these thoughts, which they don't want to have anymore. But it's not a trick. There's no trick to it. Thoughts are impermanent. Thoughts are conditioned. They will come to an end whether you like it or not. So to try to do some kind of method or practice to try to cut off the thinking or make it come to an end is really kind of beside the point. The thoughts will naturally come to an end because everything naturally comes to an end. So, here we have the meditation object. Here we have the thoughts. And who is this that's in here? Who is it that's actually watching the meditation? And again, I'm not being cute here, right? I'm not just making stuff up. I'm trying to talk about your meditation experience, like what actually happens in your mental space when you sit down to meditate. We feel like there's an observer who's sitting in the middle watching all of these things, right? Most of the time. You feel like there's a kind of an observer. So who is that? Who is that that's watching the object? Who is that that's the thoughts are coming in? Well, obviously, that's what you identify with, isn't it? You feel like that's me. I'm the observer. Oh my God, it's very complicated. And all of this stuff is happening. Why? Why is all this stuff happening? Right? Why? Because I'm the one who's in here watching. Who's that one who's in here watching? That's the meditator. Ah, that's me. I'm the meditator. I'm the one who's watching. I'm the one who's mindful. I'm the one who's aware. I'm the one who loves. I'm the one who knows. Ew, that thought, that can't be me, because that's a nasty thought. So that must be out there somewhere. So this is why we have this idea that thoughts are coming in, right? The thoughts are outside, because actually we've identified ourselves with our good self, which is the meditator, the one who knows. Yeah.
My experience is that if I'm actually able to watch the thoughts,
Yeah.
then it's going fine. But the problem with the thoughts is when there is not the meditator, but the thoughts just take over, and without me even noticing, then I'm just going totally away.
So they've taken you over, yeah.
There is an object and the thoughts and the meditator watching it all, and it's fine. I'm kind of like watching over the whole thing.
Well, it's kind of...
But the problem is that the thoughts just like take over, and I don't even notice it.
Well, it's kind of fine, but it's still complicated, right? There's still all this stuff happening. Yeah? So this is what tends to happen in meditation. Our sense of ego gets involved, and our sense of ego identifies with us as the meditator. And by the way, this isn't just my opinion, this is science. There was a study that came out recently that showed, or alleged to show, that people after they'd done yoga or meditated had a higher sense of ego. Now look, okay, these days I'm very skeptical about any supposedly scientific findings from psychology. So I would take that with a serious grain of salt, but still, there's something to that. So my point here is that this whole construct, this whole complex of what we're doing here is something which is there to defend our ego by alienating, by dissociating from our thoughts, especially our negative thoughts, and by making this construct where we can conceive of ourselves as being the virtuous one and the good one. Because why are we good? Because we're doing the hard work. Right? The meditator is the one who does the hard work, because doing hard work is good, especially if it hurts. Right? That makes it doubly good. So we're in there, we're doing hard work, it hurts, therefore we must be a good person. I'm not saying that this is like a complete and full description of meditation, right? I'm saying that there's something to this idea, and that even if if it's not always the case all the time with you, I'm sure it isn't, but there's something to it. And as I said earlier, the way that the Buddha talked about meditation is quite different. And the Buddha didn't use any of this kind of language. He talked about meditation in quite a different kind of way. And when he talked about breath meditation, he said, So sato va asasati, sato pasasati. Mindful, one breathes in. Mindful, one breathes out. There's no object. There's no thoughts coming in and all of these kinds of things. There is breathing in and breathing out. It's an action. It's what you are doing. You are doing the same thing that you've always been doing. You've always been breathing. And your breathing has always been calming you down. There's a beautiful simile in the Anapanasati Samyutta that talks about just as a breeze would blow the leaves before it, and the wind would blow the leaves away, in the same way that your breath will blow and scatter the 5 hindrances. And when you think about that, you're just breathing, and you're just doing it mindfully, that's all. It's the only difference. And if you breathe and you breathe mindfully, it's a lot harder for your ego to get involved. You're not doing anything. Rather than thinking about, I'm going to do this meditation because then I'm going to become peaceful and I'm going to have insight and all of these kinds of things, then it's a different attitude to meditation. We step out of the way and we let the breath do the meditation. We let the breath calm us down. It's not our job to make ourselves calm in meditation. It's our job to step out of the way, and especially to step our ego out of the way and trust that the breath knows what it's doing. And we bring mindfulness to that process, and as we bring mindfulness to that process, the breath will gradually take care of us, soothe us, and calm us down. And you don't have to do anything about it. And so just remember this. Remember one thing about breath meditation. And that is that it can't help but work, even for you. Because it's not about you, and it's not about your ego. It's just nature. That's what nature is. If you step out of the way, let the breath do its work, then it will calm you down. Let's do some guided meditation for half an hour or so, and let's see what it's like if we put this into practice. So sitting quietly, let the awareness settle back inside your body. Don't have any expectations, don't have any worries, don't try to do anything or get anything or be anything. And as you sit there, and as your body becomes peaceful and settled, just gradually become aware of the gentle feeling of the breath as it comes in and the breath as it goes out. Don't try to focus on the breath at any particular point. Don't worry about where you perceive the breath. Just feel it. Make your awareness settle back just a little bit off the breath, rather than pushing into it. If you back awareness back off the breath just a little bit, you'll find that the breath starts to come to you. And trust the breath. It wants to look after you. It's been keeping you alive all of these years. It's never failed you. And feel that soothing and gentle energy that the breathing brings to you. And when your mind starts to think about this and that, bring that same kind of soothing energy to that. Whatever that thought is, it's part of you. It's something that you're doing. Bring love and care to it. Don't hate yourself. Don't hate your thoughts. Your thoughts are okay. Give them some love. And soon enough you'll find that they start to settle down. You can feel that gentle rhythm of the breath moving through your body, calming you right down. Every muscle in your body, every part of your body, all the energies, feelings. All becoming peaceful, all becoming settled. And as you become more peaceful with the breath, Just let that boundary of the observer or the knower come to dissolve. Just be one with the breath, be one with your body, be one with that process of gradually settling down. So now coming near to the end of the meditation, bring awareness back into your body and into the sounds around. And before we finish, taking a minute to reflect back and understand what it is that just happened to you in this meditation. How did you change? What was the breath like? What was that experience? Was it any different to how you normally meditate? Each time you practice, you should reflect like this for a minute or two at the end. Not during the meditation, only at the end. And if you do that, then you'll learn about the nature of your own mind. And when you understand the nature of your own mind, then you'll understand how to meditate the right way every time. And finally, we can dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy, may all beings be well, may all beings realize Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.